What's up, humans, and welcome to a new Psicoactivo. Happy Saturday, everybody. Okay, so I want to thank Christopher Sharp from the Liberation Times for quoting the Psicoactivo interview with Representative Eric Burleson. Thank you, Chris, for highlighting this. This is something that I've been trying to get into the conversation, but I haven't looked into it that much. Now that you came out with an article talking about it, I think that it's time to dig into it because there is something that really concerns me about how the politics is being played in Washington when it comes to the UFO disclosure movement, the UAP Disclosure Act, and all those hearings that take place. Something that really worries me is that many of these politicians that are making decisions for the population, they tend to leave a lot of that decision making and a lot of the logistics of the decision making to their staffers. And some of these politicians are already up there in age, very, very old, and they still seem to have a lot of power. The older ones have even presented some instances where you can clearly tell that they're no longer fit for the position.
Bipartisan cooperation and a string of
Yeah. Go ahead, John.
But they're still in their position. Why is that happening? I think that it's because many of these staffers do make a lot of these decisions for them because they clearly are no longer apt to make these decisions. So, with this in mind, I was talking to Eric Burleson, and this is what Chris Sharp quoted from the interview that I did with him, where he talks about how David Grush is helping him with the UAPDA language. And he mentions a staffer, and he talks about how the UAPDA was blocked, but he doesn't directly say it. And Chris Sharp is now coming out with a really interesting piece where he specifically names a staffer that is potentially responsible for Mitch McConnell being directly involved with 3 years of the UAPDA not passing. So let me play you first the Eric Burleson interview, that part, and then I'm going to read to you that article from Chris Sharp where he names this staffer and where he presents the landscape of how things are going and just talk about how influential these staffers are to all of this. And potentially they're maybe the reason or one of the main reasons why this legislation hasn't gone exactly as it's written.
In addition, Grush has been helpful for me when it comes to the language that we're working on, the UAP Disclosure Act. We attempted to try to get that onto the National Defense Authorization Act at the end of this year and got very close to getting it added to the bill. That's a whole nother story. I could go into great detail about that process. But in the last hearing, you could tell that I was frustrated. Whenever I had my 5 minutes, I expressed that just the previous night, the Rules Committee had determined that my amendment was not germane or was out of scope for the National Defense Authorization Act. And anybody, like any reasonable person would say that that's flatly false. Like you cannot say that language that's giving instructions to the Department of Defense and all the agencies within the Department of Defense that is not in the scope of the bill. It was certainly in the scope the previous year when the Senate added that language on. No one said that was out of the scope. So I think it was just a red herring or a reason to not take up the topic. And the staff were the ones that made that decision. So I've got to do a lot of groundwork, and I have been doing a lot of groundwork since then to try to get the permission from all of the different, what they call four corners. That would be the chairman, the ranking member of all of the committees that would be involved. The unfortunate thing is that, and the reason why this is so hard, is that most topics you only need to talk to the chairman and the ranking member of the House and the chairman and ranking member of the Senate for whatever that committee is. But when this topic, because it touches so many different areas, I've got to talk to the chair and the ranking member of House Armed Services Committee and Senate and House Intelligence and Oversight, and then recently determined that Senate Appropriations has a play in this, and so the last attempt that we tried to get it added, which was on, as the bill was in conference at the very end of this year, there was a narrow window where we had a very slim chance to get that language added to the bill. But I had to get the sign off on all of the four corners of I think 4 committees, which we got nearly all of them. But for some reason, there was some group that was blocking it. And I think what was relayed to me that I haven't been able to prove or nail down was that Senate Appropriations staff were hesitant to give up that kind of control to the other committees. They felt like a lot of that purview that they had, and this is all turf. Right? This is a lot of these committees and the committee staff try to protect their turf, and they don't want any other committees to have access to the same information that they have. It's sad, but it's true. But I haven't been able to confirm that. So that's what was relayed to me from other people in the Senate. And that's something that we're just going to have. I'm going to have to sit down and have meetings with a lot of these Senate staff to figure out what's really the issue.
So this is the article from Chris Sharp at the Liberation Times. It says, sources blame Senator McConnell for UFO transparency law failure. In 2025, Senator Mitch McConnell and his staff played a central role in the derailment of major unidentified anomalous phenomena UAP transparency legislation, according to sources who spoke to Liberation Times. Sources identified Terry Carmack, McConnell's chief of staff, as the staffer who they say pressed to have the UAP Disclosure Act, UAPDA, stripped from the 2026 National Defense Authorization Act after Representative Eric Burleson had submitted it as an amendment. One source claimed to Liberation Times, and I quote, Mitch always worked against it, UAP disclosure. He is the number one villain. Number 2 is Terry, specifically. But it doesn't get clearer than that, I think. And I think that this is extremely concerning because it does appear that the Senate staffers and staffers also from some members of Congress seem to have a lot of pull and a lot of power, and they're working behind the scenes. And I don't think that's right. I don't know if you guys agree. Let me know what you think about this. What do you think about this staffer from McConnell being like one of the main people that blocked all of this? I don't know what you guys think. I know that there's a lot of you that don't think that this is a good idea, just the legislation overall. But I do think that it is an important topic, and I know that it is important for a lot of you that watch this channel. And I do think that even though there's a lot of difference of opinion when it comes to UFO disclosure from the government, I still think that there is people that are working towards getting some of this passed so it can be more official. And even though that I don't think that the president is going to do anything for disclosure, really, especially based on today's events, I still think that despite ignoring the Senate and the House and making this decision unilaterally, I still think that Senate and House still hold some power. And I think that whatever they do when it comes to legislation is very important for the topic. Even though you guys seem to have a president that makes unilateral decisions while actively ignoring both the Senate and the House. It's a sad situation, I know. Not good news today overall, but I think that it was important for me to report on.